All right, we're back, and we're here now. We had to up our age here. We went from a 100-year-old World War II Army veteran from the European theater to a 101-year-old Navy veteran from the Pacific theater. And we welcome with us here Bill Dillon. As always, my co-host Stacy Case is here. And let's dive right into it, Bill. Literally, you were a submariner.
Yeah,
so we dove right in there. You sink the aircraft carrier. You go home. What happens next?
well, before I do that, I'm going to answer that question. But the reason why I'm here is because I'm a walking history book, and I know that. And Jack is a walking history book, and there's very, very few people around. And my real purpose is it's not for me. It never was for me. And everything I ever did was always for somebody else. And the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons why I'm here is I want to excite the new generations that's becoming behind us. And I want them to know that people like Jack and I did what we did. Then by gosh, you guys ought to be able to do equal or even better than what we did. Now to answer John's question here about the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier that we sunk, it was so different in this sense. When we sunk that thing, it was during a raging typhoon. And the only reason why we knew that the fleet was coming by, it was more than a carrier, there's a couple of destroyers and a couple of other boats with it, quite a few. And we had broken the code of the Japanese, or they did, and they notified us that the fleet was on its way back to Japan, and they had left trucks. And on this aircraft carrier, there were two aircraft carriers, actually a truck. And what they did just before they had left truck, they had sunk our sister ship, which was the USS Sculpin, which was the 191. Our boat was 192, and they had just been sunk. And they tried to get in a battle with the Japanese. And of course, they were the losers. And 40 some people were rescued, and 21 were put on one carrier, and 20 was put on the other carrier. And the ship that got sunk, which was the Sculpin, the skipper, not the skipper, but the commander of the task force was on the boat, and he got the Medal of Honor. And the reason why he got the Medal of Honor was because he knew so much about the secrecy of the what's going on in the Navy Department, and he was afraid to do that, so he went down with the boat. And so the 21 people that went on this one aircraft carrier, which is a CHUYO, and included in that were these 21 of my friends. And these were the people that, when we were in Pearl Harbor, we had gone to dances together, and we went to bars, and we had barbecues and played ball and all that sort of stuff, just 3 weeks before that. So they get put on this aircraft carrier. Of course, we didn't know that they were on the aircraft carrier. We didn't know that. But anyway, to finish the story, that they had notified us that this fleet was coming. So what we did, we went out in front, way out in front, and then we had to wait 3 days for it to come by. And we weren't even sure they were going to come by because the weather was so bad. And what does that mean about the weather? Well, in a submarine, most of the attacks that you make in sinking of any vessels or engagement with any vessels is usually done at the depth of 45 to 50 feet, where the submarine is sort of submerged, and the only thing sticking up is the periscopes. And so normally, before you go down, what you would do if you're on the deck, and you would use your binoculars, and you tried to find out what the vessels were that you're going to make an attack on. Now, the reason for Jesus, this story gets long, but the reason why we did that was that you want to identify the vessels that you're shooting at, because you want to know the depth of the ships that you're shooting. You want to know the length of it, and you want to know how fast you could go, because when you fire a torpedo, the earliest you're going to hit it is within 17 to 90 seconds. And so they're moving and you're moving, so you have to make sure that you compensate for that. So we didn't know any of that. So all we had was the radar, and I was on the radar. And so the only inputs that you got to what we call the TDC, which is the target data computer, and what you have to do, you have to put the right information into that computer so it does its computations for you. And then when you fire, you just follow what the computer told you. So what we did is that since we couldn't see anything whatsoever, that in fact we're on the surface and everything else, you couldn't see anything, and we're reporting the radar to the TDC operator, and he records that, and then the TDC records it, and then it in turn sends it to the torpedoes in the forward engine room or the aft engine room, or the aft torpedo room. And so here, what we did, we came back, all I could do, all I was reporting was a whole bunch of blips. I don't even know what a blip is, but if you see these things on TV and they show you checking your heart, and you see your heart movements, and well, a blip is the same thing. And so you're looking at the ship, you'll see different blips. And the size of the blip that you get sort of indicates to you that that's a larger vessel than any of the others. And so what I did is I picked out the largest blip that we could see on the screen. We had no idea what it was, and reporting its range, and the speed and all that sort of stuff to get into the TDC. And then what we did, we fired four torpedoes from the forward torpedo row, and believe it or not, and two of them struck. Now, if you want to picture this for a second, here's a submarine, doesn't know what's out there, hasn't seen it. All we got is radar. Here's a ship, our fleet of ships, they're moving. They're doing their they didn't make any movements to disengage from us because they didn't think a submarine would do what we were going to do. And so but they're moving and we're moving and the torpedo's moving, and you never saw it. All you got was the radar guy giving you the information. And my gosh, we hit 2 out of 4. What happened? That alone is absolutely almost unbelievable.
Yes.
It's more than sheer luck. But anyway, we did it. So what it did, it stopped the carrier, and we did. That was at midnight, by the way. Besides all that, it was midnight, and so we didn't see it. We didn't see the ship until about 9 o'clock the next morning. But all told, we fired 11 torpedoes at, and then we sunk it. But then all these guys were jumping off the boats and everything else, and we weren't trying to do anything to save any one of them. But the Japanese, with their destroyers, they were trying to rescue as many of the guys that they could. So on these 21 guys, 20 of them died. 20 of them died. And how they died, I'm going to tell you this. This is, John tells you, I can go on and go on, but anyway. But what happened was that of the 20 guys that died, they knew it was us. They knew they were hit, and they were saying, "Sink this son of a bitch! Sink this son of a bitch!" In other words, they just got sunk themselves 3 weeks before. Now they're getting sunk again, and they didn't give a damn. They just said, "Sink this son of a bitch." And the only survivor, the only reason why I know that, the only survivor was George Rochek. And George Rochek happened to be a survivor, and he went to the prison in Japan in the mines for a year before he came back. And then he came to our reunion, and I told him everything we were doing to sink him. He was telling me everything that they were doing to save themselves and what have you. And I'm the only guy who can tell you, because nobody else talked to George with respect to that. So anyway, what George was saying that when he was on the boat and he was in the water, and he got rescued, but got on board. When he got aboard the Japanese ship, they threw him back in the water again. Then he got back on again, and they threw him out the second time. And then the third time, just a wave had just threw him up on the side of the deck on the ladder, and he got halfway up the ladder and climbed aboard. And then they were going to throw him over again, but the Japanese sailors stopped him. The skipper wanted to throw him over again, and my God, the Japanese stopped him and said, "Leave him alone." And so that's how. So that's a long story in itself. And all I've done is just give you the high point, but I could talk to you a long time about the whole operation.
Well,
So
Bill, I mean, you have gazillions of stories, and just tell us why you think you are still here. I mean, you are 101 years old. You're the last remaining out of 200 men, last
Yeah.
remaining surviving crew member
No.
of the USS Sailfish. What is the secret?
Wait a minute, not only the 200. Everybody I went to school with is gone. Everybody I work with is gone. Everybody's on a submarine is gone. I have nobody left except new friends, like I'm talking to you right now. I've started a new life, okay, it's really began when everybody's gone. And why am I here? I think, well, for one thing, it was a fantastic wife, but that's something else, and it had to go. Well, I'm so long. But one of the things I believe. The other thing is, and I want to follow up with what Jack was saying earlier. There will never be another generation that never like the guys that grew up during the Depression. If you recall, the Depression, I was born in 24, and the Depression came in 29. And so we didn't, the war didn't start till December the 8th, really, but when we formed it. But anyway, in December. So we had 12 years of learning, of working through the Depression. We'll never have that again. We learned what we did. We learned how to do with nothing. We had absolutely nothing. And you think about it, no air conditioning, no radios, no television, no washing machines, no dryers, no ironers, none of that stuff existed, none. And so we went through a time that was absolutely, it will never happen again, never. And the wars are changing so fastly with respect to the ability to fight wars. So we came from a generation that will never happen again. And guys like us, we learned, as I said, to do away with nothing, but not the kids today. And then we never complained, right, Jack? We never complained.
Never complained.
no one would listen if you did. But speaking of that technology and the advances and all the things you talked about that weren't around in the Depression, one of the things that came out of World War II was radar. You were a radar man, and you could say that the radar was kind of the start of the beginnings of what is now our space program.
It really was the first.
And so I'd be really interested. You come back from the war, you marry Janet, and then you go to work for the space program. How first of all, how did you get into the space program? What prompted you to get into the space program, and then what was that like?
Oh my! The reason why I'm laughing, it's my whole career. Seriously, not really. My whole career was designed by my wife. I'm not joshing with you. I'm not kidding you. Like when we're talking about how I got selected with respect to the radar, the way everything started when I went at the boot camp, I was fantastic in math then. And what they had, they give you quite a test to find out where you're proficient in, right? And they just figured out, here's a guy who's so brilliant in math that he ought to be pretty good at electronics. And so that's how they sent me to a radar school, period. But with respect to what happened later, that I'm going. It's so long, but I'll start real quick summary. I was offered after I got out and I went to college I got the degree, and within 4 years, they offered me at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard where they build all the submarines. They offered me to head up the entire electronics department on building all new submarines and repairing all the old submarines. You got to remember, when I went to the submarines, I hadn't even had a high school diploma, and here they are after the war. They're offering me to a position in Portsmouth Naval Shipyard to head up the entire the department, and I had to turn it down. I'm going to answer your question. So I had to turn it down. Why did I turn it down? Well, because I wanted that job so badly. I thought, Jesus, this is the ultimate of all my learning and everything else. Here I'm not going to build submarines. And she says, I don't like this weather. The mosquitoes are too big and everything else.
We heard that about Jack. That's how he ended up in California. He didn't like the weather.
See, and so what did she do? Okay, so what they did, they sent me to New York, and I was on the 11th floor, right across from the stock exchange, and I lived in New Jersey. But Jesus, that's another story. To try to get to the 11th story, then going home, different transportations and everything else. But that didn't take very long because my wife says, we're not staying here either. I said, well, what she did, and she did it unbeknownst to me, she took my resume and sent it down to Cape Canaveral. And I got a letter in the mail and said they offered me a job and with more money and to start, we'll talk about it, but go into the Cape Canaveral and do working. So, but here it is. So there's a guy who was the vice president of Western Electric, which I worked for, and his name was Hugh Metcalf, and he called us while we were in our bedroom. The wife and I were sitting talking, and he did everything to talk me out of it. And he said, look, if Bill stays with us, I'm going to give him the head of the electronics department on the new missile we're going to build down at Cape Canaveral. And my wife says, are you going to offer to him tonight? And he says, Jan, I can't do that yet. We haven't got the contract. She said, goodbye.
Yeah, boy, reality sets in.
So I got to Florida.
So
I'll tell you about Florida. Go ahead.
Yeah. So now you're in Florida.
Janet wanted to live in Florida. There you go. Yay, Janet.
Yeah.
But so how did you come across Werner Van Braun? So for those in our audience who don't know who Werner Van Braun is, he was the head rocket man for the German military. He was the guy who was designing the rockets to attack England. And he ended up in America after the war. And he was kind of the main guy behind the whole U.S. space. You know, he's the father of the Mercury astronauts, essentially. So tell us, how did you get connected to him?
Oh, again, that's another long story. When I got sent to Florida, initially, I was working for RCA. And the way Cape Canaveral was established, by the way, there really wasn't much of an Eastern, what do you call it, Eastern Test Range. So they go by ETR. So with what we have is we have 13 stations, which is, tracking missiles. But I'll tell you about that in a minute. But anyway, when I got sent down there with them, the first thing they signed me with, there were two people working out of Cape Canaveral. One was the Air Force, and the other was the Army. And but the primary people using the Cape were the Army. And the Army was the General Medeiros, and this is where Dr. Werner von Braun, Dr. Diebes, Dr. Gruner, and Henry Clark, and Jack Clark, and Henry Paul, those kind of people were just beginning. But this, when we first went there, there wasn't even the first missile launch. I thought there was nothing here yet. They hadn't even built a launch pad when I first went down there. And so, as far from the space business, I'm one of the very, very few people alive who have been in it since the very beginning. I mean, very beginning. And but one of the first things that they gave me was, so I forgot to tell you, the way they Cape Canaveral was working, they had a contract with Pan American World Airways, and Pan American Airways was responsible for the whole Eastern Test Range, but they had broken up into two parts. One is they wanted the electronics department, and the other side they wanted to build all the facilities and the construction and everything else. And so what they did is they gave RCA all of the electronics parts and gave Pan American all the hard parts of going out and building construction and all that. So what they did with me, they put me in charge of of supporting the Army as we got started in the space business. So one of the first things we started out was working with the what we call the Redstone and the Redstone and the Jupiter, the Juno, which was the Army. But by this time, the Navy didn't have anything yet. And they were working on the Atlas program. And by the way, the Atlas program was classified secret. You couldn't even say that. So the Army had already got started on building the really space program. And it's like John said, what we did with Werner von Braun and Dr. Diemers and Dr. Gruner and those people we brought back, those were the Germans who were launching these V2s out of Germany and landing them into England. But when we got back, and in fact, that's a big story in itself. And it's exactly how we captured the group and got them first and brought them back.
Well, there should be a movie about that because the Russians were trying to do the same thing.
Yes,
we were in a battle with the Russians to see who was going to get the German scientists.
They wanted them badly. But that's a long story in itself. But make a long story short, so Werner von Braun. When I was working there, and this is really I say how I get started on the space program, is now I'm responsible for supporting the Army with respect to while they're on the launch pad, and even getting their facilities, working with Pan American to build the facilities for them, and working with the electronics people on the first Redstone in Juno, and all they were was missiles, and then we were just fine missiles, and the funny thing is that when the Air Force got hell, we were blowing up more missiles than we were successful in the very beginning. So there was no such thing as talking into space yet, because Werner von Braun, his big idea was what he wanted to do. He only wanted to go to the moon. That was his sole. He always wanted to go to the moon, and so that's what his got into the launch aspect concern. Okay, he wasn't really. That's a long story, but I got to be very good friends with Werner von Braun, and talking to him, I introduced my wife to him, and we became pretty good friends from a business standpoint. I didn't go to his house, he didn't go to our house type stuff. What we were good friends is in a business aspect, and so we sat next to each other, and he told me he turned out to be a fantastic individual. He turned out to be one of the nicest people you'd want to be. And he told me, Bill, that I never really wanted to kill anybody, but if I didn't launch these missiles, I would have been dead. And so I had to do what I would do, just like all of us do, right? We do what we're told. So Werner von Braun, there was a book written about Werner von Braun, and I tried to call their families because I told them I had more stories that I could talk about Werner von Braun that weren't in the book. And the sad part was the author had died just a month before. So I never got back to him. But okay, what was the question? Other than
you met him.
Other than Werner von Braun also. So nobody got as close to Werner von Braun as I did. And I would fly back and forth to Huntsville, Alabama. And I was in the meetings many times with him and a gentleman there in the crowd. But my sole job, being there, was to support the Army with respect to their launch vehicles and making damn sure that they had the telemetry stations, and they had all the radar ground tracing stations. They had all the radars. They had all the photography and everything else. So I had to go. What I had to do, I had to get on and go to each one of the stations myself and find out what they need and bring them back. And then I had to develop the budget for it. And then I had to come out and present it at the Air Force because that's where they got the money. And that's how we got built into the space program. So the space program came later, and how I got into the space program is, and how much I did in the space program is unbelievable.
Well, let's get into that. So you meet Warner Van Braun, and you have this famous story about playing hopscotch with them. You want to share that?
Oh yeah, okay. Thanks for reminding me. But
I want to hear this story, Bill. I got to hear this.
Listen.
And then when you get done, I'm going to ask you if you still play hopscotch.
Yes, I do. No, wait a minute. Yeah, that's a yes, but I'll get back to that. But how that happened was so rare. Let me say here, when you just asked a question, when somebody asks you another question, then you get off of it. Then you sort of.
So you're playing hopscotch with.
No, not yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Not yet. So I'm now I'm responsible. I'm in the blockhouse, and I'm now responsible for all the downrange stations, which is 13 stations, and I'm responsible for the whole thing, supporting them. And as I mentioned earlier, there were two people fighting to get into space first, and that one was the Army, and the other was the Air Force. Well, as a normal bureaucratic thing, the systems work. Of course, they gave it to the Americans first. And so they put it on what they call the Polaris with the Navy. And the Polaris was going to be the very first one to launch the vehicle to get into space. And of course, what happened then, it blew up in the pad. And so who's the backup? The backup was the Army, under Gentleman there, so that's where I was. So what happened was we were given 90 days from the blow up of the Polaris until we launched that very first launch satellite into space. And by God, we made it. We actually did it. And so I was in the blockhouse with all the crowd, with, like say, Gentleman there, Dr. Grutter, Dr. Davis, all those other people. And now the guys, the reason why I'm in the blockhouse is because I'm now in contact with all the downrange stations, making sure that they're prepared to record the launch and what have you. And so we launched that thing. First satellite, which is the Explorer one, the very first satellite ever put into space, and it was successful. And when it was successful, we went down to Melbourne, Florida, and this is where John's talking. We went down to Melbourne, Florida, and we had a big party. We were celebrating that the first launch we put into space. And so I drew hopscotch on the ground, and Werner von Braun and I did hopscotch on the ground. Now, absolutely nobody, you got to picture this first. You got to remember who Werner von Braun was. Here's a guy who was in World War II, and he was launching missiles all over the place, killing people right and left with the V2s and everything. And he's also blowing up on his own pads and what have you. Here's a guy who's come to the United States. Now here I am, and he and I are sitting down there and playing hopscotch. Unbelievable. And anyway, that's not in his book. And that was one of the stories that I wanted to tell you about the book. Then, of course, I introduced him to my wife. And I remember going to, these big deals that you see, the Hollywood, and they're celebrating. And I remember one meeting we were at, and Werner von Braun was sitting by himself at this meeting, and they were introducing all the very famous people in the audience, which are called Hollywood. And by God, they did not introduce Werner von Braun. Unbelievable. So I went over. That's when I introduced my wife to him, and we talked and we chit-chatted a bit. I couldn't believe that they didn't introduce that guy. So that's a long story in itself, and I've had many, many chances to work with him, and I have more stories. That's why I'm going to write another book. But go ahead.
You
Well, no, I
should,
wanted
Bill,
to
and
a-
you've got plenty of time to do it too. Real quick, this is kind of a joke, but you do still drive. Do you still hopscotch?
No, I don't. No, in fact, no,
You
I
gave it
don't.
up.
No, but I'll tell you what I did. I'll tell you, this is, in fact, just in 2025, just in 20. So we went to Hawaii. You can believe this or not, but my gosh, there was hopscotch written on the cement at the hotel where we went. Can you believe it? It was hopscotch. So nobody knew what it was. I said, Jesus, God, look, there's hopscotch. And so I took.
Do kids still play hopscotch?
No,
now?
evidently, but I didn't see any kids doing it. But I took photographs. I took hopscotch. So
Hopscotch. Yeah.
anyway,
Okay, so we're
That's
in
it.
Florida. We're working on the Redstone, and so what's sort of the timeline between working on the Redstone rocket and the first launch of GPS?
oh my, oh that's a long story too. But let's
Yeah,
see.
every one of your stories is long. It's a
I-
good thing you're 101 years old.
That's one of the reasons I'm here, I guess. But uh, oh my goodness gracious, what was the question?
What was the timeline from
Okay.
the Redstone rockets
Oh.
to the first GPS launch?
Oh my goodness gracious! Like I said, the very first launches, if you recall, were nothing more than missiles. They were not intended to go to space, and so what we did, launching the vehicles until we got ourselves to a point where we had enough thrust. We had to build up a vehicle that had enough thrust to be able to put that satellite into space.
Mhm.
But going from there, and let me think here just a second. You can believe it or not, but I'm in motion. I'm there. I'm there right now
I
at this
bet.
moment, really. And
This
I'm
is a
looking at it.
critical moment in
So,
history. While you're
no,
thinking about
no,
that, Bill, this is a critical moment in history.
uh,
Let's set the
yeah,
stage. So we don't
but
have GPS yet. You are on the launch team that put the first satellite
yeah.
in orbit.
Well,
Amazing.
That's a strange story too, because what they transferred me out here, they transferred me from Cape Canaveral to California for two reasons. One was that the Air Force was getting into the missile program, the space program, and they had a program called BMARS, BMARS, the Ballistic Early Warning Warning System. So I got transferred. That's really the reason why I got transferred there. And but from Florida to here, but on the way out, they told me that as soon as I got out here, I would be promoted to the director of the BMARS program, which was the very first. It was the very first program that the Air Force had to go to space. That's what that was for. There was two reasons. First, it was launching the missiles over the North Pole and into Russia. That's what it was set for. And they had enough thrust to be able to put it in satellites. So that they transferred me out here to be able to head up their program. But on the way out, I was halfway, ripped up my family, didn't want to come, ripped up my family and headed to the Cape. But on the way, they canceled the program. So the Air Force now is out of business from the space program, period. The only people left now was the only people left was the Army. Okay. So the director that I was supposed to get evaporated. So I didn't get the promotion, even though I ripped up my family. I'm on my way out, and here they said they're going to make me director, and it was gone. Now, that was luck. Why was it luck? Because it was luck. And what the next thing was, they said there was a program by Defense Inspector David Packard wanted me to, the company did, they wanted me to head up a program called the for
Titan.
but no, it was what they call the near term and the far term for the Air Force. but the near term was for the first 5 years, what did the Air Force need from a defense type of thing and offense for the first 5 years, and then what did they need for the next 5 years? I don't know if you want to try to put that in your head sometime, and you try to think, you want to think 5 years ahead, and then another 5 years to do that. Well, we did it. Okay, we actually did it. It took. I worked that program. I worked. I worked 9 months from January. I'm going to lead up to when John sent to the first launch. So I worked from 90 hours a week, 90 hours from January the 1st, so January until September. And I never gave up a day at all, worked 7 days a week for 90 hours. I gave up one day to go to church, go to mass, because we were near the end of the program. And so we finished that program. Now, what came out of that was one of the things that came out was the GPS. Okay. I don't know if you know what the GPS. GPS is a super complicated system. Nobody really understands how it works. We're talking about 1970 now. I mean, in 1970, and we really haven't had the first launch yet. So when we developed this thing in 1970, the very first launch didn't occur until 1978, and then it didn't complete. It didn't become operational until 1994. Now, why did it take so long? Because what we did, we generated. This is 1970. This is when the computers were only 64K, which is nothing. This is like me talking to you at 64K. And so here we developed it. Now, what is this GPS? Well, the GPS has 3 constellations, and each constellation is composed of six satellites. Then, in 1970, it's more now, but in 1970, it was only 6. So you had to put 6 satellites into space to cover a certain area on the ground for one. Then the second generation was another similar, but it was to cover a different ground. And then the third generation is the 6 satellites. It covers it. So it covers the whole world. It covers the whole world in satellites from 3 different satellites. Now picture this: you put 6 satellites into space. Okay. So what? So what does that do? You have a ground system. You have to have a ground system to do track. I did all the ground system for the satellite. And that's documented in a classified document. It was secret type of thing back then. But anyway, what we did, we put 6 satellites in space. You always had to see 4. Every time these 6 circles around, you always see 4 at one time. When one goes down, the other comes up. Another goes down, another comes up. So you always see 4. Well, why do you need 4? Because you only need 3 normally to find what it is. The reason why you need 4, because you need that 4th satellite to give you the time that all of the other data that you're getting. So you know that data that you're looking at now, for each one of the other satellites is gives you, and this is the time. So when you look at your book, today is so damn different. I don't know if you can picture us generate that in 1970. 1970.
Well, it's come a long way, and people still can't find the grocery store with their GPS. So, I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Anyway, so the GPS is something. What happened? So the study we did, they took our president and they took him to Washington D.C. Gave them the highest technical award period, and us 21 guys who busted our rear end and did 9 months and given everything we possibly could to our country and to that program. We got nothing. They weren't even acknowledged. And I wrote a letter to the company later, and I said, hey, look, we don't want anything. All we want is recognition. We don't want any money. And they just wrote back and said, thank you for your letter, blah, 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 blah. Thank you for your service, blah, blah. In other words, they considered that. As of today, the 21 engineers that did that work got no credit whatsoever, none. And yet, if you get the books, you'll find 4 classified documents. I'm the signer. I headed it. I control it. It's my name everywhere. His name is nowhere. It's nowhere in the book. He never looked at it, never came to a meeting, never gave an input, nothing. That's the way the bureaucratic system works. Anyway, that's GPS.
Okay, so now we do GPS, and then how did you end up on the solid rocket booster program for the space shuttle?
Oh, I see.
Because you
So
just
many
jump in,
layers to this life. Yeah.
you
It's
just
amazing.
jump in from one of a kind thing to the next one of a kind thing.
Right.
No. The so I'm out here working this. So I worked the very first. I got involved
I
with.
smell Janet in this story somewhere.
I got it. Yeah, she'll
Where
come
did
in,
Janet
yeah.
want to go next?
Well, see, don't digest me, but he brings up a good point. You picture this now. Here's a gal. I met her when she was 13 years old. I married her when she was 18. Okay, and I'll tell you a story about that later. And I had 7 kids from her. Now here's a husband who you got all these kids when you're home. This is after the war, of course, I'm home, but I'm traveling and hiring people and everything else. And you take a wife, when he comes home, all she does, she got those babies and he leaves, okay? And then, so she raised all the kids. You think about it for a second. And she stuck to me like glue. If I'd have been her, I'd have said, get lost, get out of my life. But she didn't. So I had her for 72 years and 4 months. And she was a one-man woman, and I was a one-woman man. And that's the way it is today. I've had my share. Now, what else did you want to know?
Well, no, so we create GPS, and then how do we get into the space shuttle solid rocket booster?
Oh, well, the same people that were developing the rockets for to go into space were both for the Army and for the Air Force type of thing. So I became, what I did after this, I became the manager of the solid rocket booster program. And so I used to travel around on that. And one of the things I would do would be, believe it or not, is that when we recovered the rockets after a shot, which they did after tied to the Titan or tied to the launch vehicle, the Titans started out with a Titan 2 and Titan 3. So I would you'll go to the manufacturer, and I'd take a look at when I go to Huntsville and look at what I call it, the rings. When you stack solid rocket boosters, there's a double ring in there, neoprene, double ring in there. One was the second one was primarily a backup. In almost every case, when I inspected the rings, they had broken through. So here's 2, and the second one had the first one had broken through. Not all of them, but several. And this was at a time, I don't know if you recall, when you have a washer or anything like that, you can bend it, type of thing. When it's soft, it's like, but whenever it's cold, you can take it breaks. The same thing happened in the solid rocket booster program. So when what was the name of the one?
Space shuttle.
When the space shuttle blew up, it was 19 degrees for several days in Florida. And what you have, before you launch a vehicle, you have people responsible to say, go, 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 go. What they were doing, you take each one of the systems that you have on board that they're responsible for, and they'll say, go, 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 go. At the same time, while they're doing this, there's 3 guys that weren't even there. They were saying, no, please, no, don't go. That they went anyway. And what happened? A few seconds later, blew up and took all those people with them. And what was this for? It was nothing for a bureaucratic show. They should have waited on it. And it's today. And that's why I had no, when you talk to NASA, I get so upset. I don't want anything to do with NASA, nothing. I think it was one of the worst organizations built. The only reason why they exist today is that it's the money flow that you get from NASA that flows into the contractors that do all the work. NASA does nothing, nothing. It's all done by contractors. And
True.
so,
That's true.
so when
Yeah.
they said go, and of course they went and blew it up. And
That was what,
you-
1987, I think, right?
uh,
Right around there, 86, 87, when
Yeah.
the space shuttle.
Yeah, so you don't hear anything about that. So anyway, my book tells you the truth, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here. I tell the truth,
yeah.
Truth, truth. And
Yes, we like the
in
truth.
the book I got,
1986.
I'm going to get into some of this and tell you. Go ahead.
No, so where were you on January 28th, 1986, when the Challenger blew up? Were
I
you in
was at
California or?
No, I was in Cape Canaveral. No, I was in Cape Canaveral. And so the first, I forget the first, I was on the first 17 launches of the Titan program out of Cape Canaveral, first 17. And I was, you talked about what else you see, and I was also the launch director on the launch vehicles. You talk about, here's a kid in high school, quit high school as a junior and comes out and goes and and I got my bachelor's degree. I got my GED, I got my bachelor's degree, I got my master's degree, and started trying to get my PhD. Here's a guy. This is one of the reasons before we're through, and I'm going to tell you one of the reasons I'm here, and one of the reasons I'm even talking to you and things like this. I want to inspire these new kids. If I can do it with no education system, if I can do it, damn it, you can do it. And so one of the things I'm good. No, I want you to. I don't want you to quit working. Don't ever quit working, ever. I'm talking.
And you got your got your GED after the war. Just want to make the timeline clear. You got your GED after the war.
Got the yes. Why did I get out of the service?
School junior year. Yeah.
Okay, no, I'll get that. Why did I get out of the service? Well, the reason I married in January January the 5th of 1946. Okay. The war ended in August, October of 1945. And so I hadn't even had a chance to go date with my wife and, the normal things you do. I came right out, got married. So now, let's see, here that was 1946. And I got out of the service when November 1947, almost 2 years later. Well, 2 years later, I already had my firstborn, and my wife was pregnant with the second one, all right? And so what did I want to do? I said, to hell with this Navy. I don't want any more Navy work, because the downtime after the World War II, what was the Navy, they would take our submarines out on the weekends. They'd go to different islands and everything else, and just gallivant and shoot around, because the officers wanted to go there and they wanted to keep training up. Hell, that's the time we wanted to stay home and take care of our kids. And so here it comes a weekend, and I believe it or not, I look back and I'm a Catholic, and I firmly believe in Catholicism. And I would make my wife, when she was pregnant, go to church with me, and she's throwing up and all that. I look back and you stupid jerk. I had no idea what was going on. But anyway, so I wanted to raise my kids, and they wouldn't let me because they was always going to sea. And my wife was left home. She's the first kid at 18 years old, for heaven's sakes, and taking care of it. So I said, "Well, hell with it." So I'm still a radioman first class on the USS the Sea Leopard. And the war was over. Wait a minute, the war was over, and I get discharged, and I went down the plank, and the skipper comes down. And by the way the service works, they never call you by your first name. Never. They always call you by your last name, and you always have to call them by sir or whatever. So anyway, I went down the plank, and they said, Dillon, if you stay here, I'll promote you. You have a chief of the boat. You have a chief radioman. Well, I turned around and told him, shove it right up your. And I said, I didn't like the skipper. I said, I don't want anything to do with you. I said, I wouldn't stay on this boat come hell or high water. Boom. But then as I'm walking down, I'm thinking to myself, you stupid jerk. you know, you're still in the service. You still got 2 months left. And he could call you back and discharge the hell out of you, you know, and put you in the, what do you call it, prison or whatever. But I said, to hell with it. I was never controlled. My life, I was never controlled. Even today, I'll never stand anybody controlling me. Anyway, that's a long story.
So now we're past NASA. The space shuttle blows up, Challenger.
Yeah.
And then what happens? What do you do now?
Well, forget that. Even that when we got the first shot. When I worked with JPL, which is the Jet Propulsion Laboratory out here in California. I worked very closely with them. And I forgot the other thing. Jesus. Well, let me go back a little bit and I'll come back to this one. While I was still in the Cape, after I got out of school and everything, the way we launched vehicles was you launch vehicles, it's all done by telemetry and everything else. And after I launched, it would take you anywhere from 3 to 5 days to check whether or not you passed or not. You have to go through and look at all the data that you get, and you'll have, I mean, every system, you have to look at it, all the data points, and then before you decide whether or not it was safe or not. Well, I said, BS, that's a hell of a way to do it. So I did. I went back to high school. Went back to college. Well, it's good to get my master's degree. I took courses in software, how you build software. And so I developed a system on software, how you could launch a vehicle using software so that at the conclusion of the test, you either passed or you didn't pass. Well, it did. We had a system that I worked on for that. It took me 2 years to do it. And it was a system called Ocala, which is Online Computer Launch System. Ocala, it's all documented, written. You'll see me as the primary author in it, and developed the very first electronic checkout for launch vehicles. So what we had to do, we had to launch 3 vehicles to prove that we could do it, because we still had to make sure that over the 3 days that everything was right, but we knew exactly that they passed it right away. And after 3 flights, we proved that we could do it. Now everybody uses that launch vehicle, and NASA used it. NASA was the first one to pick it up and start using it. That's what I did before I moved out, before I got out here. So then the other question, which one was the other working before I digressed?
No, I was asking about you after the Challenger, the solid rocket program, you came back to California.
Oh.
And then you have more kids. And don't you end up coaching baseball?
Oh, well, no, I didn't. Oh, at home, I was a Little League manager too. Besides all this, I was a Little League manager. I have a Little League manager, and they voted me as the Little League Manager of the Year, and my wife is the Little League Woman of the Year. And these are kids that grew up in the area in which I live. Believe it or not, these were the kids that grew up in the area. That every one of them, when we moved into the place, it was only 19 houses. It was very, very small. And then you began to grow a little bit. So we had a few young kids and growing. So anyway, so I got very close with them, and I'd go visit their house. And I would take them down, even when I get time off, I'd still do it, take it down, play with them. And just recently, when I had my 100th birthday, we had a guy, they're in their 60s now, and this kid came in and he knocked on my door and said, Mr. Dillon, and by the way, even when I was young and we were cool, they always called me Mr. Dillon. It was never Bill or anything. It was always Mr. Dillon. It was always a boss. And he said, Mr. Dillon. And I said, oh, Jim. I said, what the hell are you doing here? He said, well, he said, sold my house and I'm moving to another state. And then he said, before I leave, I want to come and tell you, I'll get tears in my eyes even now, that how you were is my life, how you affected my life. There's a guy 60 years old, come back and tell you that you had such an impact on him. And that's the way.
Well, let's finish up with that, because we have to finish up. So what would you like to tell the parents and the kids out there that are out there? Jack gave us a little bit about what he wanted to say. So let's hear it from your perspective.
Well,
because I know you go visit schools.
I do. And And it started out, it's never, and it's frankly, Jack, it's never about us, never. It's always, you're always a giver. It's always a giver. And you look for nothing in return. In fact, recently, as far as one of my real objectives is, I wish people would call me. I wouldn't mind they call me every day and let me get in front of these classes and talk to the kids. And I'll tell you 2 stories real quick. One I just visited recently. I had a teacher from one of the elite junior high schools, and he asked me, Bill, he said, would you mind coming and talk to one of my class? And I said, no, I wouldn't mind it. He said, well, I got 3 classes. Would you mind doing that? I said, geez, hell no, I'll be glad to do it. So anyway, so I went to class with beginning at 8 o'clock in the morning, and believe it or not, the first class was a whole hour, ding, ding, ding. Next class came in, talked for another hour, ding, ding, ding. Next class came in, ding, ding, ding. And so I talked for 3 solid hours without a break. Now, what the hell did I told the teacher, look, as you can tell from me, you just get me talking. Hell feels like keep you here for 3 weeks. But anyway, so what
Jack's
happened?
perking up.
So just what happened? So what happened was that I told him, I said, look, I'm not going to, when I give a talk, I never prepare a note, never. And I don't know what I'm going to say. No way. Just like we're here today. I have no idea. So what I did was I told him, look, I'm not going to give you 3 speeches. So what I did, I gave him 3 speeches. What I did, the first one's the end, I told him all about the depression. Told him all about the depression. And then when the next class came in, the teacher would go to speak what I did. And then I talked about what I did during the war. Then next class came in, ding, ding, the next class came in. Then I told them everything I did after war. So I got 3 different classes, I gave 3 different speeches without a break in between. And one kid in the second class he sort of dozed. When I give a talk, I watch the audience. And if I'm losing the audience, I cut it off right away. But anyway, so this kid was dozing not. So I stopped right then and there. I looked at the teacher and said, if there's no interest in my speech, I'm done. We'll finish it. I see that either wake up or tell him to get the hell out of here. And by God, he popped right up. He was wide awake for the rest of the day.
Good.
That's the kind of guy you're talking to. So anyway,
yeah.
That's
well, we might. It seems like we're gonna maybe have to have you come back for part 3. You got more stuff to go through. But
More stuff.
Wait a minute. No, you know General Flynn?
Yes.
Well, anyway, General Flynn has authorized me to write the book of my life. And
good.
What she did, he gave it to Cameron Mitchell, Cameron Moore to do it. But in the meantime, what happened was that we found out we found out that the New York Times has found out about me, and what they want to do, the New York Times, they have written 60 bestsellers, and so the Times said they want to write the story of my life, and they're going to pay for it. They're going to come and do everything. So we're going to be starting that within the next couple of weeks or so. So you'll see me again from the New York Times. Anyway, but they don't know what they're getting into. But when this thing starts talking, I'm like Jack. We're Moran here. We're very, very fucking. We're very, very lucky. We're very astute. We're the brains. We got all the brains.
No, it's awesome. It's like having a Encyclopedia Britannica in your living room.
Yep,
we're lucky.
It is.
We're very. On this conversation, you believe it or not, you just all we done was hit the high spots.
Yeah, well, so much more to discuss for sure.
We really appreciate your time for both you and Jack.
Yes.
It's been an awesome afternoon. And with that, we'll sign off and we'll see you guys next Thursday.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dillon.
What?
Not you, but
Next Thursday.
no. Hope
No,
Springs
no.
Eternal every Thursday at 12 o'clock Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern. Join us then.